So this is the Nike Phantom 6 Low Elite, which is, in essence, the GX3 with a different name. But what Nike have done here is to merge the upper from the GX1 and 2, then they've slapped it on a new and better outsole and given it a new shape and fit. And that sounds pretty good, but the big question is if it's actually better. So in today's video, as always, I'll tell you what it does well and also not so well to hopefully help you decide if you should buy a pair of these on Unisport or not. And then you might be wondering, what on earth am I doing on the roof of the Tottenham Stadium? Well, the thing is that Nike say that the Phantom 6 is scary good. So I thought it was only fitting that I do the review in a place that tickles my primal fears. And this does. I'm JayMike and this is my Phantom 6 Low Elite review. Let's do this. Anyway, the first thing you notice about the Phantom 6 Low is that it looks a lot like the GX1. And to some extent, it is. Nike have more or less gone back to the recipe that was so popular with a two-layer construction, an inner Flyknit base and an outer shell made of grip knit. But it's not exactly the same, because Nike have also taken inspiration from the ribs on the Phantom GX2. But unlike on this boot, they've made the ribs not by compressing and molding the ribs, which made them a little bit not hard, but dense to the touch. On the Phantom 6, instead they've actually engineered the ribs into the grip knit as it's being made. So while there is more ribs and more texture, the grip knit is actually softer than on GX2. But anyways, comfy. I'm gonna get back to the upper in a little bit, because the first thing I noticed when I put the Phantom 6s on was that Nike have changed the last, so the shape that the boot has been built around. So the first two GXs, they ran a quarter of a size long, which meant that a lot of people, myself included, had a little bit of a tough time finding the perfect fit, because there was a little bit of extra dead space in the toe and it wasn't long enough to go down half a size. And also, despite the upper being really soft, some people found that the low pointy toe box was a little overly tight and sometimes a bit claustrophobic. So Nike wanted to change that, and they did so by adding just a little bit more height and volume in the toe area itself, but also actually making the boot a little bit shorter in the length, meaning that now it actually fits more true to size. And we're just talking about a few millimeters here, but it has a huge effect on the feel of the fit, because it's just a little bit, to me, it's a lot better, because it just feels a bit more natural and connected, but still comfortable. And that's actually a really nice change. Now, what's also really nice is having that GX1 construction back. So the grip knit here is actually nice and soft and molds really well to your foot. But with that said, it's not exactly the same level of softness as you got back then. It is soft enough, so when you step into the boot, it will mold around your foot more or less like that. There's no breaking time needed, and with that new last giving you a better shape around your foot, it just feels really comfortable stepping in. It just molds, takes to the shape of your foot like a pair of slightly structured socks, really. Now, comparing it to the GX2 that had this one-piece upper and a slightly more free, uncompressed fit, it's not quite as, easygoing and as adjustable. You do feel as if it wraps your foot a little bit more and maybe locks it slightly better in place throughout the midfoot and the forefoot of the boot. And actually, it reminds me a little bit of the fit in the Future 8 Ultimate, if you've tried that. Just way better, obviously, because not only is the material softer, but it just accommodates more to the shape of your foot. Now, when we're talking width, it's more or less perfect for my normal to slightly narrow midfoot, but even for wider feet, it's gonna be solid because of the slightly wider midfoot here. Obviously, the more volume in the forefoot, so unless you have like a really wide, very flat foot with a lot of volume, this is going to be a great ride. But one thing I also noticed is that the new fit and last of the boot also means that the lockdown, to me at least, is actually above average. It's quite good and definitely better than both the GX1 that was okay, and then the GX2 that was perhaps a little bit locking in the lockdown department because of the slightly more free sensation. But that improved lockdown, I would say, comes from three things. One is, of course, the added structure of the grip knit itself. It's just a little bit more tight around your foot. There's also the whole GX1-like construction. It just basically holds your foot a little bit more in place. There's just more structure around your foot to do that lockdown. And then finally, of course, the heel, where Nike have changed the shape.
And it sounds like a minor thing, but it's actually a really big deal because now it tapers a little bit up top. It becomes a little bit more tight and slightly more anatomical. And that also means that it hugs the foot a little bit tighter, pinches that part of the heel a little bit better, meaning that it just locks it more securely in place than it did on the GX1 and 2. And because you still have that cutout in the heel, it's also pretty much effortlessly comfortable. You don't really notice that it's there, only that it does what it's supposed to. And to me, that's a big improvement. I didn't really like the heels in the GX1 and 2, and this is just such a big step up because it doesn't feel sloppy. Your heel doesn't move up and down and side to side. It just fits, holds your foot in place, and that really helps the overall sensation of the boot, where it's comfortable, it's easy to wear, but it's also locked in, tight around your foot, and focused on performance. And that's a great shape. Slipper-like performance, you can't complain about that.
But the touch is also different, because Nike have changed the stickiness of the upper a little bit at least, introduced more ribs, and even made a dedicated, firmer strike zone.
And the first thing I noticed was that the ribs themselves don't feel as solid or dense as they do on the GX2, but more like an integrated part of the upper. And also because they're not as high, I feel as if they balance out the grip a little bit, or the craziness of the grip if you want. Because the grip knit itself has this almost matte spiderweb-like waxy stickiness to it. But because you have the ribs, unlike the GX1 where it was just this flat piece of grip knit that was really, in your face levels of grippy, it feels as if the ribs kind of decrease the contact area with the ball a little bit, decreases the area where the grip knit can actually grip the ball. And thus it just evens it out a little bit, takes the worst of the sting out of the grip, so to speak. And I like that balance compared to the very grippy, overwhelmingly grippy GX1. Now, of course, if you've never played with a grip knit boot before, either a Phantom or a Mercurial, it might feel like a lot. And it will probably take some getting used to, especially if you're playing on like a dry pitch with a sticky match ball. But to me, I like that little edge that it gives you on the ball, that sense of like an amplified sense of control. It's not gonna make you a better footballer, but there's just something extra with grip knit. And I think that's special. And finally, there is the slightly firmer strike zone here, where the ribs are just a little bit more thick and dense. Does it make a big difference in terms of applying swerve or give you a harder, more precise shot? Let's be honest, no, not really. But I will say that having this like zone of giving you the slightly firmer, more, a punchy feel as you strike the ball when you make those ping passes, it's a nice little thing. Could I have lived without it? Oh, absolutely, but it just adds that little thing on top that doesn't really disrupt the rest of the touch and feel. So, we cool.
Yeah.
And then there is the outsole, where Nike have stuck with the Cyclone 360 configuration, but added an extra row of forefoot studs and stiffened up the midfoot.
And that to me is a very welcome change, but actually also a needed one, I would say, because on the GX2 here, I know some people loved it, but it also split opinion. I had some stud pressure on this stud, mostly because there was such a big distance between these two rows. And also, I was lacking a little bit of midfoot lockdown. It just didn't feel all that responsive to me. And it doesn't have to be a Mercurial, but just, actually responding a little bit to your movements would be nice. So what Nike have done here, I feel, is really nice. They've stiffened up the midfoot, it feels nice and stable, and giving us 2 rows of studs right here just evens out the pressure a little bit. So I didn't have any problems with stud pressure. It feels nice, solid rotational movements, and it's just a little bit more comfortable, and I would say, it's not normal, but just ever so slightly more refined. And since you still have that little bit of aggressive toe off because of the Cyclone studs when you push off, I just think it's a really nice little package. I also really love the stud pattern on the GX1, but for me, with the outsole and the studs, I know some people don't like the Cyclone studs. I don't mind them, so this is probably the best outsole of the 3 for me.
However, while a lot has changed and improved, there are also a few annoying things, potentially at least, that you need to know about.
And the first one is the new shape. It's definitely not a problem to me, but if you are a wider footed player, you have a larger foot, the Phantom 6 will fit you a bit tighter than the GX2 and maybe, potentially at least, not as well. And then there are these two little solid Nike swooshes that might look cool, but just as for the touch, feels a little bit unnecessary. They are a little bit hard, so when I touch the ball with the outside or pass the ball with the instep, I just feel that firmness pressuring my foot. And I could have done without that, to be fair. And then there is the trade-off between structure and softness on the upper. Now, personally, I'm still a big fan of that almost magical softness on the Phantom GX1. And if you expect the same level of softness on the Phantom 6, well, you won't quite get that. It's still soft, but the GX1 just still hits different. And finally, there is the shape of the heel, which I realize is a weird thing to complain about because on the launch colorway that I have here, the heel is really good. But the problem is that on some of the upcoming colorways that I also have and have tried, the shape of the heel and the width of the heel, it varies a lot. So I hope it's just me that's really unlucky and that the public general release will have this heel shape. But to be honest, if you don't really know what you're gonna get and the heels vary a lot, that's a bit of a problem. So, let's see.
But from my time with the Phantom 6 Low so far, it is a thoroughly enjoyable boot. Is it a mind-blowing revolution? Probably not. But that extra grippiness gives it character, and it also takes a step back towards the magic of the GX1. And with that new fit, to me, it's probably the most well-rounded of the new Phantoms.
It just has that holy trinity of a snug, secure, but still super soft and very comfortable upper, a much better outsole, and an even better fit. And I think that if you miss the vibes of the GX1, while this is definitely not the same, it has the magic that you got back from that boot. And with everything new going on, I actually reckon that this is my favorite out of the GX1, the GX2, and the Phantom 6. And if you're like me and you want the boot, well, you can buy it on the link to Unisport right over there. I'm a little bit, wobbly up here, but it's hard to talk. Also, of course, you should tell me what you think of the Phantom 6 Low in the comment section right down below. Subscribe to the channel and like the video if you haven't done so already. And with those words, I heard there's an F1 karting track under the stadium, so we're gonna go all the way down to see that. And with those words, I'll be signing off. Cheerio.